Hello. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is George Riscala. I am the founder and CEO of the Product Factory LLC in Burbank, California. Um, Product Factory, as Rich mentioned, we're known mostly for doing a bunch of Marvel animated TV series and movies and a lot of TV shows for Warner's and Stars and Film Roman. We've also done quite a bit recently for Amazon and Netflix and all the streaming services that are out there. So we've been around now for going on, I guess we're going on almost 13, 14 years. Started in 2003. Little brief background on me. I started way back when as an assistant editor, and that assistant editor was also a tape op and a film assistant. So I was cutting on film as well as doing the tape op stuff. Many people have been in the tape room and remember the gruelingness of it. You learn a lot, though. Then at one point during my assistant time, I pulled this thing called the Avid out of the box. It was a computer. I had a little bit of experience with computers. I loved computers, actually. But I never used it for editing. And so the day I pulled it out of the box, I honestly had no idea how it would change the path of my life. I think many people realized that it would change their path, but I did not realize how much it would change the path. After that, I became an editor, and I started editing for quite a bit, and I realized that I really enjoyed not just the day-to-day of the editing, but the bigger picture of post-production in general. So I moved into post-supervising. I post-supervised and edited most of the same projects. So I would supervise it and make sure it got done correctly and for a certain budget. And a lot of these were TV shows, and some of them were lower budget features. But I really enjoyed doing that. And then of course I moved into producing after that, where I helped develop the project a little more and also supervised it and got the funding. So therefore I was responsible for the money. So while I was editing and post-supervising, I knew where all the money was going. And at that time, I was spending a tremendous amount of time in and out of larger facilities. And back in those days, the facilities were huge and the equipment was expensive. And then as the equipment was getting cheaper and everything was going desktop, I thought, well, it's time to start my own company. And a little bit about the inception of the Product Factory. When we started, it was really based on trying to get the projects that I was supervising, working on, and they were my own projects, to be able to take advantage of the new technology that was coming out. Mainly at the time it was Final Cut Pro, DVD Studio Pro, these desktop technologies that most of the big facilities wouldn't touch. I think a lot of it was because the big facilities had so much money invested in the old technology that it was hard for them to change. And it made me realize that there's new evolution in post facilities that's coming. That evolution was changing the essence of post-production. It was changing the way everybody worked. So when I set out to make my own place, I made a conscientious effort to build something small enough that it could keep up with the technology, but it had to be big enough to make the clients feel comfortable working with the post facility. It had to feel like a real post facility. But you also didn't want to be so big, like I said, that you couldn't change when the technology changed. So briefly, what makes a good post facility? Well, you start with the talent. Of course, if you don't have people who know what they're doing, you kind of don't have much to do. And of course, I was an editor, so I kind of, in my own mind, decided, well, we're going to train editors and assistant editors to be, and visual effects artists and sound mixers to work the way I wanted them to work, which was from the client side, from the producer side, not necessarily from the way that a facility thinks. The next thing you need is management. Management is one of those things where you have to ride a very thin line. Too much management will slow your company down, and not enough management, well, that's just it doesn't work at all, and it's embarrassing. The next thing is, of course, you need some good projects, projects and clients, because without that, you have no income, and you're really just a hobbyist at that point. And then equipment. Equipment is another line I like to ride. I never want to have so much equipment that we owe a ton of money, and we can't change with the technology, but you also want to have enough equipment so that the employees feel like things can get done correctly. You never want an employee going, if I only just had this little thing, it would save me 2 hours a day. So you don't want to, as my dad used to say, skip over a dollar to save a penny. And then the last and most important thing, especially to this talk, is infrastructure. Infrastructure is what makes everything run. Without infrastructure, you can't. You're not going to get big clients. You're not going to get big projects. It's really what makes all of the things above come together. So what is infrastructure? Well, according to Webster's dictionary, infrastructure is the framework, equipment, or systems needed to keep an organization running. So in this example, what do you need to sell your services as a post-production facility? Well, you need a minimum amount of payroll. You need accounting, billing, of course, basic equipment in offices, and somebody's got to order the coffee, all that stuff. But you also don't want it to be so big that, again, it slows down the company. So there's a tremendous amount of, as far as I could tell, the tremendous amount of problem with having too much infrastructure in a company, where there's so many people standing around doing nothing that it actually slows down your production. And of course, you're paying for all that. And as a producer, I could see that was just wasting my money. So really, you need a strong but inexpensive infrastructure. And I came to realize very quickly that the backbone of my infrastructure was my shared storage system. That was what kept everybody working together, working at the same time, working on where we put the media, where we put the projects. That's what made everything work. So we're going to step back a little, where we built our first shared storage system, and this was our pre-edit share days. This was back in 2004. 2004, 2005, we really didn't have a lot of options when it came to shared storage. We weren't an Avid house, so Unity wasn't going to work. There was StoreNext and FiberJet. StoreNext was extremely expensive, and FiberJet was what we ended up with for a while. It's a volume level system, and volume level locking, so only one person could read and write to the volume. Everybody else could read. It was difficult to use. It worked great when you're doing features. It really does. It's a great, when we did movies, it was perfect, because you really only have one editor reading and writing, and then everybody else would, visual effects team, and everybody would put it to a FireWire drive, and then one person would be responsible for copying it back. But after we started doing series, we needed something a little more substantial, so we ended up with something called Metasan. And it was a read and write to every volume system. Everybody could read, everybody could write. And it worked very, very well. Of course, when it worked very well. And again, we were limited in our options. It was really the only thing out there. Again, this is going back to 2007, 2006, 2007. Since it was a big bunch of volumes, so all it did was mount all the volumes on the desktop. So everybody had access to every single volume. Everybody could read and write at the same time. So what this required me to do was write a tremendous amount of processes and procedures of where to put media, when to put media, and who could move media, and where to copy it. And so it was based on people doing all the media management manually. So even with all that, we actually ended up saving 15% on our labor costs. When I added up all the amount of time people were actually doing the manual media management versus having to, shuttle FireWire drives back and forth, we were still saving well over 15%. And it quickly became the backbone of our infrastructure. Our clients love the idea of using as many bays as they want. I love the idea of being able to move somebody into a bay because this computer was acting up, so go in there until I figure out what's going on. It was really working great. Like I said, when it worked great, and that 15% savings was amazing. So as we move history, we continue to grow quite a bit, actually. And by 2009, we have grown about 6 times where we started. And the more employees we threw at our system, and the more projects we threw at our system, the more I started to see cracks. The cracks weren't just in the technology, but the cracks were in that manual media management time that it was taken. It was also that our system was just going down so much. So now we're losing money because when that system goes down, everybody's sitting around until I restart it and getting it up and running. So I started to see what I saw, my non-billable hours chart, which is something I started to do weekly at that point, which is to see how much money I was losing by people just sitting around. Whether that was sitting around and doing manual media management, I can't charge a client for media management, or just sitting around because the entire system was down. And mainly, the shared storage, if it goes down, everybody goes down. So you have to be very careful with that. So I started to keep very, very close track of my non-billable hours. And it was exceeding. And I can't have non-billable hours, it's just too much. And then when the shared storage continued to crash, I was able to calculate my downtime costs. I have, 14 editors and 7 visual effects people, and it's costing me about $1,200 per hour, $700 to $1,200 per hour, for people just to sit around while our servers are restarted and our support teams are arguing over whose fault it is and who should be fixing it. So at that point in 2009, I decided, you know what, it's time for a new system. So I began the evaluation process, and I needed to cut my non-billable hours by as much as possible. I just can't afford it, and nobody really can. It's a big waste of money. So we started the cost-benefit analysis of it, and we took the cost of the shared storage system up against our non-billable hours, because we'd like to cut them by at least 50%, and we're going to cut our media management time. So if we can put all that in there, we can afford, compare it to the cost of the system, because you're actually saving money by using a new system. So then I started looking at the different companies and the different options. Now, 2009, 2010, we had quite a bit more choice than we had back in the early 2000s. So we started looking at all the different companies that are out there and asking a few questions. One is, how long has this company been around? And 2, are they growing or contracting? My favorite little thing is, I like to look at people's booths in NAB. When I go to NAB, is their booth getting smaller or is it getting bigger? There's quite a few companies where the booth stays the same. There's only a few companies where the booth gets bigger every year, or and there's quite a few again who are contracting. I don't want a company that's contracting when they're going to be the backbone of my infrastructure. I want a company that's at least going to be the same size the next year, because I need them there for me. So then I started saying, okay, well, let's look at the systems directly. Is it something we can design to meet our needs? More to the point, we have a very unique workflow. Okay, so about 80% of our work is animation. Animation is a very unique workflow, and we were doing it in different way than anybody else because we weren't a network or a studio. We were a vendor. So could I design it custom for our system? Is it an open or closed system? Can I add or subtract to the size as needed? Could I add more seats? Could I add different software packages? Can I use different hardware? And then, of course, what advantages is it going to give me, both in a day-to-day sense, but also in a financial sense? Am I going to save money on this thing, or is it going to break even, or am I going to lose money? So I came up with my 5 S's of shared storage, and these are the 5 things I like to compare to each system. Number 1 is stability. How stable is it? Is it going to be up more than it's down? Is it going to be knock us out and cost me $1,200 an hour? Security. By 2009, 2010, security, especially in the digital world, has become extremely tight. Working with Marvel and Disney and all the big studios, they are very, very strict with their security standards. And then it's not unheard of for them to show up in our facility and, hey, let me see your security, and they do audits almost constantly. Speed. How many bays am I going to need to support? How many people? What kind of data and throughput am I going to need? Support. Support, of course, is very important. As I mentioned before, I like somebody to have my back. I don't have IT. I am the CFO, CTO, and COO, so I don't really have anyone here who can work on support issues 24/7. I like a company that, especially because we're paying for it, they're going to be there for you. They're going to respond. Suitability. Suitability is my way of saying, is it a suitable system for all the different projects and workflows that you are using? We use a tremendous amount of different products. Everything from After Effects and Premiere to Final Cut 7. We've done Final Cut X. We use Maya. We use Cinema 3D. I'm sorry, Cinema 4D. Is the system going to work with it? We even do Avid projects. So, is the system going to work for all the things I need, or am I going to have to trick it, or how suitable is it for each project and each workflow? So I rated each one 1 to 5. How important is each one? 1, of course, being not important at all, and 5 being a mission critical thing. The higher the score, of course, and the higher the cost. So the first thing in your mind is, okay, well, we want a 25 system. We're going to give everything 25. Well, first of all, I don't think that system exists. And if it does exist, it probably costs well over $1 million. I don't know of any system that does everything perfectly. So I said, okay, now I got to give a little and take a little on the sections that I want a little bit more. So we started with, of course, stability, and I gave that a 5 because, like I said, $1,200 an hour is my downtime costs, and I don't want to pay it anymore. Security. We have a couple of other security protocols in place, like you can't get into a door without logging in, you can't get into a client without logging in, so I can give a little bit on security. Speed. So at this point, like I said, 85% of our work is animation, which we do in ProRes HQ, so I can give a little bit in speed because I have yet to do any 4K, and when we have done it, or Ultra HD, we do, to direct attached storage. Support, as I said, that's very important to me. I need somebody who's got my back, and I need somebody who's going to not, point fingers and then hang up the phone. And then, of course, suitability. Again, we do a tremendous amount of different kinds of projects, so I give that 4 points. So I give myself a total of 20. So that means I need a pretty substantial system, which helped me narrow it down because there's quite a few systems out there that are, entry-level systems. They may work for what they're for, but, they're pieced together from different vendors, and the support is spread out and varied if it exists at all. And of course, it's a lot cheaper. I'm sure I could have saved a tremendous amount of money by piecing things together myself, but I just don't have the time. And to be honest, again, if I piece it together now and save a little bit of money up front, the reality is I lose $1,200 an hour down the line, and it's just not worth it to me. So I found my way to EditShare. And what made me, of course, it met my goals. It gave me my 20 points, and it also has a tremendous amount of features that I didn't even know I needed at the time. So it met my minimum requirements. It had built-in media management. The bundled system was really great. Media management built in, which also is a security built-in security, because you can allow people to log into only the projects that they're looking for, they're supposed to be working on, and nobody is nobody is able to access things they're not supposed to be accessing. Completely client independent. If I had a Linux machine, which I don't use Linux, but if I had a Linux machine, if I have Windows machines, if I have Mac machines, it will attach to anything. And of course, with client independent, it's completely OS independent as well as software independent. So, Premiere works just as well as Final Cut 7. It has, Avid works quite well. You can share projects in Avid just like you can share a project in Premiere or Final Cut. One of my favorite little features that I wasn't expecting, which is the no per seat cost. You don't have to pay, you don't have to call somebody and say, hey, I need to buy a seat because we're really busy this month and I need to throw in another visual effects guy. All you really need to do is find yourself a Cat6 cable, attach it to the switch, and you'll have a client up and off running within minutes. It's really a great little feature. It's one support number. I can call one guy. He will help me, guy or gal I should say, and he'll help me get this thing, whatever issue I have. Now, I have yet to have the thing go down, knock wood, it's been about 3 years. It never goes down completely, but whenever I do have an issue or a question, I call one person and that person is there. And if they can't help me on the phone, they will log in and help me get it up and running. So it's really a great list of features. The media management is, our media management time has been cut down by well over 50%. Our non-billable hours have gone down overall by about 80%. And right now also there's another feature, which is I can assign other people to be limited admins. So when I go on vacation and somebody else needs to log in and say give access or permissions to different people because we've needed to add more people to a project, I can actually give somebody a limited administrative capability and they can do that. So in summary, I would say take your time and make your decision as deliberately as possible. Start by knowing what you need before you start looking into a system, and spending a tremendous amount of money. Know where your costs are, know what your savings are going to be, because that actually applies to the cost. Whether it's saving it up front or losing it down the line, it's still a cost. You gotta kind of take that all into consideration and ask all the questions you need to ask, and that's how I came to my decision, and I think that's how it works for everyone. All right, that's all. Thank you very much.
Great. Hey, thank you very much, George. I'm going to pass it over to Grant now.
Now, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Alrighty. So today I'm going to show everybody a little bit about the interface. I've been with EditShare for quite a long time, so I've walked through this demo a few times before. I'll try not to go too fast or get too distracted here, but we'll probably take some questions at the end, but we'll jump right in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into a remote view. This is, as you can see, this is VNC Viewer. This is just a remote view of my EditShare desktop. I've got a number of tools here on the right-hand side, and I've opened up one, and I've minimized it down here, so I'm just going to open that one up. And this is one of our tools for Avid. We also have some other tools here, managed, unmanaged. Those are tools that we would use for Final Cut, for Premiere, excuse me, some of our other applications. Sorry, just taking a little drink there. But rest assured, all the tools are pretty much the same. The Avid tool, we do some specific things in the background so that the Avid editing system, the software itself, actually thinks that the EditShare media space is an ISIS media space. So it appears identical to an ISIS or a Unity system. So we'll just walk through here. First tab here is users. This is where we add a username, and we'll call this user Albert. And we're going to add Albert to the system. And now we can give Albert permission to see different media spaces like George was talking before. I can have Albert see one media space, or he could see 5 media spaces, or he could see every media space that's on the system. But it's all up to me as the admin. And that's what this tool is. This is the admin tool of the permissions of who can see what on the EditShare system. Next tab here is groups. If you're at a larger facility, we can actually create a group, add users to the group, and then assign permissions through that group, trickle down to all the users in that group. Asset groups, it's the same thing for our asset management system, which we'll get into in a few minutes. So the next big tab here is media spaces. The media space is a virtual drive on the EditShare that we can create, and we can make this drive any size we want. And we can even dynamically change the size of that drive after the fact. So I'm going to create a space here, and let's see, what do we want to call it? Media. We're going to call it Media Systems. I'm going to tell it where I want to put it on my system. I'm just going to allocate it to the larger of the two available RAIDs. And I'm going to allow it to default to the quota that I've set in here, which is 150 gigs. I'm going to add that to the system. Now that I've added that to the system, I can go over here, and I can select my media systems media space, and I can either add a group or a user very quickly and very easily. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add multiple. I'm going to click on that Add Multiple, and anytime we see a multiple window tab here, it's going to open up a grid style for us, a grid style interface, and across the top I'm going to have my media spaces. Down the side I'm going to have my groups and my users. If I wanted to add Albert to everything, I could just click on Albert's name. He just got added to every media space I have on this system. If I wanted to add one user, or I'm sorry, if I wanted to add everybody to a particular media space, and let's just check that media systems media space, I could click on the name of that media space, and now everyone is added to that media space. Or I could go through individually, add people one at a time, or I could select one of my groups and watch what happens when I select my group. So I'm automatically going to gray out or add the people that are in that group, part of that group. So depending on how I set things up, I'm going to give people permission to see that media space. When those people have permission to see that media space, our system is a file level system, which means everybody can read and write to the same media space at the same time. This does a couple things. Number one, it makes it easier to contain all the material for a particular project in a single space. Okay? Now that may not sound like a big deal, but when I'm looking for media that has to do with that project, I now only have to look in that one space. When I'm backing up that project, I only have to back up that one space. When I'm deleting that project, I now only have to go to that one space and delete that one space. I don't have to look at 3 or 4 different media spaces because only one person could write to that media space at a particular time. Some other systems are designed that way. Those are volume level systems, some of what George once again talked about a little bit earlier, but our system is not. Our system is file level. Everybody can read and write to that space at the same time. And we have a traffic cop that makes sure that everybody's additions get added to that media space. Okay. Next tab here, usage and quotas. So I'm going to open up the RAID that we put that media space on, and you can see all the different media spaces that we have here. And here's the media space that we just created. It's allocated 150 gigs. That was the default. It's got 44 KB in there. That's just a page file in there. We haven't actually even gone into that media space yet, so there's nothing in there. But watch what happens. Let's say I misjudged, and we really only needed 50 gigs for that media space. I can make that 50 gigs. Okay. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's easy. There's nothing in that one. But what about one where there's some material? Well, here's a media space called the hockey media space. It's got 60 gigs in there already, and we've allocated 321 gigs. So let's make this smaller. Let's make this 75 gigs. We're going to put a little bit more stuff in there, but not a ton. You know what? I meant to make that $1.25. Okay. I can make that smaller. I can make that larger without any issues. It's an instantaneous change. So if you're working in a room, you can call the admin, hey, we're running out of space. The admin can jump into this interface, change the size of a media space, you keep working. All right. Next tab here is project spaces. So Avid has a really nice, easy way to allow multiple editors to work on the same project at the same time. They've had this feature forever. It's called project sharing. Our system, once again, it seems identical to the Avid system, identical to an ISIS or a Unity system, so it works exactly the same way. But Avid's the only application that sort of has that inherent ability to do that. And it has that inherent ability because it has this project window, and there are what are called Avid bins. If you're not familiar with Avid, they're called Avid bins inside of those. When you open one of those Avid bins, you get the read and write permission to that, and then everybody else has read permission to that particular bin. So years ago, when we figured out how to do this for Avid, you know, some of our editors, some of our customers that worked with Avid and then went on to other editing platforms came to us and said, hey, look, you guys figured this out for Avid. We're not on Avid anymore, so we need you to figure this out for Final Cut and for Premiere. So we said, okay, you know, let's do that. That sounds like a great idea. So we looked at it. We figured out a way to do this for Final Cut and for Premiere. which I'll show you when we get to what the editors will see. But this is where we set that up. Same type of thing. We're going to give that space a name. We're going to decide what type of project it is, and we have some different variations with different sets of permissions. And then once again, we're going to click on the Add Multiple. We got our spaces and the type of space they are across the top, and then our groups and users down. Again, we can add permission to these just like we do a media space, and then those people have the ability to share that project space with the other users. But we'll take a look at that, how that appears to the end user, to the editor, in just a few moments. The next couple tabs here, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on. We've got public profiles. This is designed for larger facilities. I've got a lot of users. This is a great, easy way to sort of arbitrarily dictate what those users are going to mount when they log on to the system. I can set up a bunch of different permissions or settings in here and say, okay, all these people are going to automatically mount this particular media space. Maybe it's our B-roll media space or our graphics or our audio media space that everybody needs permission to see, or we always want to have mounted in case we need it. And then we've got our quality of service. This is like a bandwidth guarantee, a bandwidth reservation that we can give to particular users if we decide to do that. Regardless of what is happening on the system, if one of these users was to enact their bandwidth reservation, they would be guaranteed that level of performance. Okay. So once again, all the stuff that we just talked about in here, this is all admin stuff. The editors, they're not necessarily ever going to see this unless you're the editor that's the admin of the system, of course. And then you'd be in charge of this. But once this system is set up, the amount of time that you spend in this tool per week, depending on the size of your facility, conservatively, no more than 5 minutes a day. Larger facilities, maybe 10 minutes. 5 minutes a week. Larger facilities, maybe no more than 10 minutes a week. A lot of times we don't even have dedicated admin people that are managing the system in small to mid-sized facilities. It's just an editor that goes in and will change the size of the media space for everybody so that the system can function the way that they need it to. But it's pretty much set and forget once it's set up. Now let's show you what the editors are going to see. I've already launched my Edit Share Connect tool, and when I launched Edit Share Connect, these drives mounted on my desktop. These are all media spaces or project spaces that are on the Edit Share, and you can see those spaces over here, okay? And I've even got some, if I can scroll down here, I've even got some that are not mounted. Now, it's only going to mount what I had mounted the last time I was on the system. So if I unmount a few of these and then I logged off here, walked to another computer, it's only going to mount what I had mounted the last time I was on. So it's going to have memory of that, and it's not going to mount whatever I unmount here before I leave. So it's really nice in that aspect. Next, let me show you. Here's where we reserve our bandwidth. Right here. Just wanted to show you that. And then our projects tab. So if we're doing our shared projects and we're not in Avid, we're using Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, we're going to go here. I'm going to select this Adobe project. And here's my Adobe project. Here's two Adobe quote-unquote projects. We're going to treat them more like Avid bins. Okay? And if I click on one of these, my name is now going to appear over here. And you see that lock icon turned to a green unlock icon. Well, if I had another computer here and another user sitting next to me, on their screen, my name would appear here just the way that it is for me, but this would turn red on their screen. And that would mean that they could open that file, they could open that project, but they could not write to it. It would be in read-only mode. So it protects that project. Now, they could do a save as if they wanted to, so we could still collaborate. I could be working on a 60, they could open that project, do some stuff to it, make that 60 into a 30, and then do a save as, and then just change the name Grant's Final.30 or something like that. So now we have two versions with half the work. Okay, we can also conveniently pop this little window out, and this is where my Avid bin window or project window is when I open up Avid. This window has memory, so it's always going to mount there for me. And when I launch Final Cut 7 or Premiere, my Premiere or Final Cut 7 windows are going to automatically mount around that window, and it will fit in and look like it's part of the application. If I close that, it just pops right back in here. Limited admin. Limited admin is really cool. A lot of the admin tools that I showed you earlier inside of the admin interface, inside of the remote connection to the EditShare desktop, I can give on a limited basis to a particular user, a particular group of users, on a case-by-case, on a media space-by-media space basis, and on a user-by-user basis. And, you know, I can give them the ability to do some really cool things. The biggest one that is the most common is obviously change the size of the media space, because everybody's always concerned that they're going to run out of space. So we can do that on a case-by-case, on a space-by-space, and on a permission-by-permission basis. So it's a really nice way to do that. We've got some other tabs here, settings. We can go in, change our passwords, optimize for 10 gig, things like that. We've also got a log and a news. News is going to tell us, hey, there's a new version of EditShare out, has these additional features, fixes these couple bugs. And you can find out more here if you click on that. And then we've also got our dummy light that's up here. Now, the system will send you a daily health report. However, if you're not paying attention to the daily health report, or if you're not the one that gets the daily health report, if this ever says anything other than good, you want to click on it, because it's going to say, hey, there's, you know, a drive failed, or, you know, there was a power outage, and you should check X, Y, and Z. And it'll tell you that right inside of here. Now, mine obviously says good, so it's not going to show anything, but it's a nice sort of backstop check in case the person who normally gets those emails might be out, they might be out sick, or they might have set up their emails all to go to spam, which has happened before. Okay, so we're going to minimize that. So as far as the shared storage and the features for the shared storage, that's everything that the system does. Now I'm going to show you the extra tools that you get with every EditShare at no charge. And these tools are extremely powerful. These are the workflow tools. These are the asset management tools that our system comes with. Those tools are a product called Flow. And Flow has a couple iterations. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 of them here today. The first one is Flow Browse. The Flow Browse is the tool that we browse our footage with. We look through footage here. We can create rough cut sequences here. We can search for footage here. We can do all that right inside this interface. So I'm going to click on a clip here. Here's a clip. As you can see, I've got lots of colorful things up here on the screen. This is actually a mark-in. This is a locator with a note. There's no note on that one. I think there's a note on this. There we go. There's a note on this. I can move the in and out. I can move the locator. Here's my out mark. Here's some other locators. I can play this clip. I can stop that clip. I just hit the space bar on my keyboard. Very straightforward. And I can tell that this clip is online. Now, you can all tell that this clip is online because you can see it if you have eyes. However, what I'm referring to is the high-res version of this clip. This is a low-res proxy. This is a low-res proxy representation of the high-res clip that's somewhere else on the EditShare system. Now, how do I know that the high-res is online just by looking at the low-res? Because they're 2 different files, right? I can tell because there's a green bar, a green box around this clip. That's a quick visual indicator to tell me that the high-res version of this clip is online on my shared storage on my EditShare system. If this box was a red box that was around here, it would indicate that the high-res version was offline. So it's a real nice quick visual indicator. I can also check myself by going down here and seeing what the status says. And the status says online. If the high-res version of this was offline, it would say offline. Okay? So I can do a couple things with this clip. Number one, I can go in here and I can put all this, you know, in, out, you know, locators, markers, add notes to it. And that's great inside of this interface. An assistant could do this, a producer could do this. But what sort of help does that give my editor? Because this isn't in my Avid, this isn't in my Final Cut, this isn't in my Premiere. Well, guess what? I can drag it over. And when I drag it over into my editing application, it's going to relink to the high-res clip. My mark in, my mark out, my locators, and all my notes are going to come over, and they're going to be on the high-res clip in my NLE. So it is in my NLE as soon as I drag it over. So I can actually take that one step further, and I'm going to go to our projects tab here. And as opposed to just an individual clip, I can actually put together an entire rough cut sequence, which I've done here, of about 30 plus clips. And I can, just like the individual clip, I can grab this sequence, and I can drag that sequence over into my Avid, my Final Cut, my Premiere. It's going to bring over the entire rough cut string out sequence that I've built, and the editor can start working on it. Now you're probably saying, that's awesome, but what happens if some of this footage or one of these clips is offline? Well, as I mentioned before, there'd be a red bar around here. Okay, you can add an archive system to any edit chair. We have an archive product called Arc, and Arc and Flow talk to each other. I'm not going to get into Arc today, but I do want to mention it here because it does add a very powerful workflow when you're looking through, you're finding clips that are offline. If this clip had a red bar around it and it was offline, the high-res version was offline, it would say offline. Now, if we've archived it on Arc, it would say offline archived. I could then create an archive job from this clip. It would reach into my archive, pull out that one individual clip. Likewise, with this sequence, this icon would be red. That would indicate that at least one clip in here was offline. I would also see some red dashes in here where those clips were offline, where the clip was offline. I could then right-click on this and create an Arc Restore job from this sequence. It would then look at the sequence and say, okay, out of the, I think there's about 30 or so clips in here, 32 clips. Out of these 32 clips, 17 of them are online, the rest are offline. So we're not going to touch the 17 clips that are online, but we're going to reach into the archive, and it may be one archive, it may be two archives, it may be 5 different archives. We're going to reach into those different archives, and instead of restoring the entire archive, which each one of those might be a terabyte, 2 terabytes, or larger, we're just going to pull out those individual clips out of those archives, put them back on the edit chair so that you can use them. So it's a really nice way to not only track the material and find the material that you have on the edit chair, but it's a great way, Flow is a great way to track and find and repurpose material, that any material that's ever been through your edit chair, even material that you've archived and haven't used for a year or 2 years or whatever. All right. And obviously, here's the search tool that we could use to search and find those clips. I might have searched on skydiving to find all the clips that I have in here. But here's our search tool. As you can see, we can add many, 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 many layers of search inside of here. I can go through and I can say, okay, let's find, let's find something that has a particular file or was shot on a particular day of the week, or was from a particular episode that we worked on, or, what have you. Maybe it was a specific type of shark, and here's the type of shark. Or maybe we want to eliminate anything that was hammerhead. We just want to get the results back of everything that wasn't tagged with hammerhead. And once again, we can add multiple layers. The fewer things you search on, obviously, the broader your response. The more things you search on, the more parameters you search on, the more specific or smaller your response generally becomes. Okay. So I'm going to minimize this for a minute, and I'm going to show you where we log and tag. This is actually my favorite tool inside of our Flow suite. It's Flow Logger. The reason it's my favorite tool is I've been an editor. I hate logging. It's the most tedious, time-consuming thing, and I just don't like it. It's just as simple as that. But this interface gives us a really easy, quick, consistent way to tag material. So I'm going to hit play, go down here. I can select these different pieces of metadata that I want to add to that. This is about a 10, 12-second clip. I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of metadata to that clip in 12 seconds. Now, none of you know me, you can't see me, but I'm 6'6", and I have huge paws. I destroy keyboards. there's no way that I could have typed Monday in 12 seconds, let alone Monday high, too much water, New Jersey, info 1 and 2. It just is not happening. I probably would have abbreviated Monday to boot, so that causes another problem. We have somebody search on Monday, and then all the things with just the letter M don't show up, because that's how I would have abbreviated Monday. Okay? And then we have somebody else search on the letter M, and none of the Monday stuff shows up. So by doing this, by building these categories and these designations inside of here, anytime we're going to log something with the day of the week, and that day of the week happens to be Monday, it's always going to be spelled out Monday. It's never going to be M-O-N, it's never going to be just M, it's never going to be anything else. So now we've got a consistent way to tag, so when we search on things, our search is much more complete, as opposed to getting back 60, 70, 80, even 90%. We now get back 100% because we're searching on one term that's a consistent term that everybody's going to have to tag with. Okay? So we've got a couple of different cool things in here. We've got these things called presets. We've got these things called templates. We've got categories and the designations within the categories. We've even got these little icon-looking things here. And let me show you some of the other templates. So this is just the generic template right now. Let me show you the GC1 template. So here's another template, and you can see I've got some similar categories in here. I've got state, holiday, location, time. Some of these are new. Some of these are the same. Shark species versus angle type. And then I've also got all these images. Well, we can put sports team jerseys in here, jersey, you know, shirt and headshot type thing in here. So I don't need to know the name of number 12 as he's involved in the play. I just need to see that jersey number 12 was involved in that play, and I can click on the name or the picture of that jersey. And then any of the metadata that I've put in here, his name, his position, what string he's on, what his major is if we're in college or something like that. I can put all that information inside of the metadata here, and then later when I search on any of that information, anything that I tag with jersey number 12 is going to pop up in my response window. Okay? So it's a really cool, easy way to log things, to tag things, and then obviously inside of Browse to find those things that you've logged and you've tagged. I have one more really cool thing that I want to show you, and that is Airflow. And Airflow is the web-based version of Flow. And this also comes with every edit chair system, which is kind of awesome. So if you have a client or if you have a producer, you can use this for a lot of different things. If you've got somebody in the field, you want to have them see something. And once again, remember, I'm able to see all this stuff because I gave myself permission to see all these different spaces. If you only want somebody to see one space, that's all they're going to see. You can limit what people see. So I can come in here, I can look at this clip, I can play this clip. I could even, if I had permission, I could even download a low-res proxy of this clip to work on at home. I can even look at, and we'll go back and you'll remember this, I can even go back and look at the sequence that we were playing earlier on. And here that sequence is. And I can play that sequence. I could even make adjustments to this sequence. I could say, hey, I really want clip 3 to be where clip 2 is. I could make those adjustments here, and they would reflect back on the local system that's at my office. And then the editor could say, oh, okay, I see Grant made an update to that. I'm going to grab that and pull it over into the Avid and work on this new version. So you can really do a lot of really nice things with Flow, both locally and even remotely now with Airflow, since Airflow is included with every system. And that's what I have for you today. I'm going to hand it on back over to Rich.
Excellent. Thanks, Grant. We're actually just going to move right into the panel, and I'll ask you a question, Grant, and Kenny and George, just feel free to chime in. We'll just kind of have it as a free-flowing conversation. One of the things that obviously is on everybody's mind these days as they're looking at shared storage and even media asset management solutions is, I'm about to start working with more 4K material. Well, what sort of ramifications does that have in terms of a customer looking at shared storage and asset management systems, and what should they kind of take into consideration as they begin looking at the type of 4K they're going to begin working with?
Well, the most important thing that I could say to everybody in general, and it's very funny because a half an hour ago I got a random phone call, and the guy on the phone said to me, hey, we're working in 4K and we've got, a half dozen systems, and, so tell me what I need. And that's a very hard question to answer because I don't know what you need until you tell me what kind of 4K you're working with. 4K, everybody says 4K, and next it'll be 6K and 8K and 12K. But 4K is a pixel density. It's a raster. It's a resolution. It's not a file size. But many years ago, when I say many, like 4, the same thing happened with HD. People came to us and said, oh, we're working in HD now. We're switching from SD to HD, and we're working in HD. And we would say, well, what kind of HD? And sometimes these people would say, oh, well, it's HDV. It's huge. No, HDV is 25 megabits, same size as DV25. So it's no different in size or weight or performance requirements than DV25. It's tiny. And the same thing is going on with 4K right now. So the first thing that I would say is be familiar with what specific 4K codec your particular facility is working with. And yes, you may be working with uncompressed or very lightly compressed, 1,000 megabit per second, 10 gig requiring 4K. Chances are you're not. But that's a very important piece of information that we need, anybody needs, to figure out how much storage you need, to figure out how much performance you need, to figure out whether you're going to be, needing 10 gigabit or 40 gigabit connections to your desktops, or whether gigabit can accommodate. And we have a lot of customers that once we find out exactly what they need, one of our smaller systems with gigabit connections is more than enough for them because they're not working with those very lightly compressed, very large 4K files. They're working with, some ProRes 4K or some DNX 4K, and it's some of the smaller codec or some of the smaller codec sizes. We're able to do those over gigabit. So the most important thing that I would say is familiarize yourself with the particular 4K codec that you're working with and understand the ramifications of working in that codec versus working in other 4K codecs. That's the most important thing. After that, then it just becomes about workflow. How do you want to work? If you're working in some of those higher resolutions, do you want to work all online? We can certainly do that, or do you want to have an offline, online workflow? And some people choose to do that as well.
While we're on the subject of buzzwords, and 4K has certainly been a big one for the past few years, another word that we often hear thrown around, especially as it pertains to storage, is cloud storage. Kenny, from your perspective, how does cloud storage, how does it relate to high-end post-production at this point in time?
I think the biggest thing in the cloud storage space is, cloud storage can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think the way that we define it is access to content, whether it's high-res or your proxy-based file. So as Grant alluded to in the demo, we create a proxy file of a high-res media clip, and Airflow, which is our gateway server that allows you cloud access to markup in terms of adding comments and notes and so forth, or doing offline projects and building a selects list. So cloud-based storage has become very important. In fact, it's probably one of the number one add-on item to an edit share system that allows you a gateway that has access to the high-res as well as the ability to view the low-res proxies in as what I like to call a glorified clip viewer. And this is important, especially in spaces where you might have like a transcription service that needs to take a look at a clip that's going to, add an MCC file at the end for transcription, or maybe you have a producer or somebody that needs to look at a clip for review and approval. And these are all parts of the workflow that need to be built out. So cloud-based access with our system, with the edit share and Airflow, allows you this access. So it's become very important. It also has implications for people that are doing stuff with studios like George with your MPA compliance. You've got to have different networks. So some people have access to the high res, some people have access to the low res proxies or to the low res files, and they have to be on separate networks. And so the Airflow gateway server, which functions as both an intranet as well as an internet tool, allows you this functionality. So really the big thing with cloud-based access is who needs to access it, what level of access do they have, do they need to be able to download a clip, download a high-res clip. It also has implications when you're talking about offline, online workflow. So for example, if you wanted to download clips and go work on it for the weekend, which obviously you can't do in a MPA environment, but if you wanted to download clips and work on them and then come back, say on a Monday or Tuesday, or upload clips from the field, you have that ability. So the cloud functionality is very important, and it has to be designed around the production workflow in terms of the production MAM, and so that's one of the key parts that I see as far as any production system, any shared storage system really has to address that cloud-based access and authentication, whether it be through a VPN connection to an Airflow gateway server or direct access. And so that's one of the key things that Edit Share delivers, that is a key contributor to your productivity, is giving people access to the proxy files or the low-res images without giving the clouded interface of having to navigate a production MAM. It's a simplified, unified interface.
Yeah, you raise a great point. It's not so much that actual collaboration with shared storage is moving to the cloud, because the bandwidths are not nearly there to do that type of thing. And that's why having shared storage inside a facility is important for that type of real-time editing collaboration. But at the same time, with post-production becoming increasingly decentralized, the ability to share the content on your server with people outside your facility is crucial. And something like Airflow indeed creates that private cloud where you're creating a cloud for everyone that you need to share your content with, and you give access to your system.
Yeah, and as Grant showed in the demo, you might have a client, so let's just call them XYZ client. The only thing they're going to see is their XYZ client media space. And so they only have access to the content that's in there as opposed to being able to access everything. So you can define to them specifically what they need to see. And that's really a great use of Airflow and a cloud-based solution. It's really defined specifically for that production workflow.
George, you had touched upon, and I thought it was really a great tool for anyone to use, kind of your 5 S's of evaluating a shared storage system. Aside from vendor selection, if someone's looking to implement a shared storage system that wasn't previously working in a collaborative environment, what kind of advice would you give a facility that's just getting into shared storage for the first time?
I would say know yourself, know what you need as far as a company, what you're looking for. Again, it's a matrix of, hey, how much can I spend, how much am I going to save, and how can I make money on this thing, or is it going to cost me money and just be an unbillable cost, which we all hate. You need to be able to decide what I need. So if you're just going to say, hey, I just want 4K, and you don't specify, well, some vendor's going to come in and put in the most expensive system they can give you, and now you're eating a tremendous amount of money for something you didn't need, because all you're really doing, as you said, is, 4K in ProRes cores. Well, that doesn't take up very much bandwidth, and you could have gotten away with a much smaller system. So I think, knowing what you need first and knowing what you can afford and honestly breaking it down, that would be, before you ever even start talking to vendors, I would say sit down and do your own homework before you start calling people up and go, okay, well, how does this one work and where would this fit? Because every single vendor is going to say, hey, my stuff works for you. And I've seen that happen way too often. They're going to come in and they're going to make an argument for their system because they have a quota to meet and they're just doing their jobs. And many of them actually believe in their product more than anything. But the reality is that it only works for, everybody has their own specific needs. So I would say know your needs, know what you can afford, and then start talking to the vendors. So that when you go in there, okay, well, he just said 50 things that, it doesn't matter to me. Doesn't make any point, doesn't help me, doesn't hurt me. I don't care. So what about what I need? Let's talk about that. And if they can't talk about that, then they're probably because they're trying to distract you from whether or not they're actually able to do that.
Yeah, make sure that the vendors that you're talking to actually make products that work in our industry. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a customer and they've told me that they're talking to someone who I've never heard of. Is a red flag right there. Because we all know each other. If you're in our industry, you all know each other. And, this company has promised them that they can do X, Y, and Z. And unfortunately, they spend money with them, and they come to realize that that company didn't know anything about shared storage for video production. They have a server, and multiple people can access it. So to them, that's shared storage. But they really don't know anything about the business of working with nonlinear systems and graphic systems and, production systems. So they spend the money, they get the system in, they're now out whatever they spent, even though it might have been less than what they would have spent on an appropriate solution. But now that money's gone, and that company won't take the system back. So, these companies, are now in a lurch. It happens a lot of times. I've seen it with colleges. Unfortunately, more often than not, and those guys are really getting in trouble because, they got to hold that system for 3 to 5 years, depending on, the specifics of that particular college, and they have a product that doesn't work for them, that they just spent money on.
Well, and I think, Grant, that leads me to also when you call support and you say, hey, look, my, Final Cut Pro crashes every time I do this, and I'm not getting enough bandwidth. Are they going to know what you're going to talk about, or are they a server? If they make bank servers, which
right, exactly. That's exactly that's exactly what I'm talking about. So make sure that who the people that you're talking to, have a reputation. It's easy to find out if they do or they don't. Have a reputation and have a number of customers that are doing what you're doing in our business. If everybody you call says they use their servers for credit card records, you should probably run the other way.
Yeah, in fact, one of the other companies I mentioned during my talk was when I talked to them at NAB, they bragged to me about how the European Central Bank just bought one of their big systems, and they were all excited about it. And to me, that went, well, so what do you know about banking software versus editing software? I don't want to know that. That's a terrible thing. It's great for the banks, but I don't really care what just because you can share an Excel file doesn't mean you know how to, share an Avid MXF file. They're totally different things. And if you can't know both, you really can't. You can't be an expert in both. And if you think you are, then you're fooling yourself and all your customers.
Right.
A key portion of what you demonstrated, Grant, was media asset management, which is a increasingly crucial part of a shared storage system. Is to be able to tap and find what's on your shared storage system, long after you've used it in a project, really dramatically increases the value of, one's investment. Kenny, throughout the years, you've worked with clients using a range of asset management systems. If you were to give some advice as to, if somebody's looking at an asset management system, what would you say are some of the most important considerations or questions that customers should ask in looking at an asset management system?
Well, there's no shortage, that's for sure. But some of the important ones are, is there a per seat license for this? Because sometimes there is. Do I get all the, is it all the features, or do I have to pay for additional features? Like, how does the licensing agreement work? The other question is, what's it do out of the box? Our product is unique in the fact that it does a ton of stuff out of the box. I don't have to go and write code to get it to do anything. There are other products out there that sometimes are, a little bit less expensive, but they don't do anything. You have to write code, and you have to actually program the system to do things. So, you're either going to hire somebody to do that for you, or you're going to put somebody on your payroll, and you're going to go and you're going to train that person until they, leave or whatever, to do that task for you. And unfortunately, that costs money. So, I've talked to a lot of people that have looked at or checked out some of these other solutions that are maybe less expensive at face value, but become much more expensive because the product doesn't do anything out of the box, and they have to actually pay somebody to come in and make it do something. So understand the products. That's the biggest thing. A lot of people go into this, and somebody says shared storage. Well, when I say shared storage, I mean a particular product. When other people say shared storage, they may just mean that multiple people can access the same drive, which isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sharing projects, sharing media, sharing sequences in an editing environment. So make sure, even though they are using the same terms, that they're speaking the same language. And the same thing goes for asset management. You want asset management? Oh, we got asset management. Okay, well, what can it do? Get a demo. That's super important. Get a demo. See it in action. Have the people walk you through the interface so that you can see what it does, and ask pointed questions. Do some research, ask pointed questions. Nothing I like more than doing a demonstration for someone and them asking me very specific questions. It shows me that they're paying attention, and they've done their research, and they're really interested in getting the right product. And I can now help them see if our product is the right product for them.
I would also add, talk to customers who have had the system for more than most any system, whether it's shared storage or a software package or a hardware package or whatever, works great for the first 6-8 months, maybe even a year. Talk to customers who've had it for a few years and see, was the support consistent? Was everything that they promised, is it working? Or did you suddenly find out you had all these unneeded costs because, yes, there's a per seat cost, but also that it's a per seat support cost. So now that's an even greater cost because you're not only paying for the seats initially, but now you got to pay, $400 per year per seat. And if you grow, that gets exponentially expensive. Find out from customers who've had it for a few years whether they're still happy or not, because everybody loves their new car that first day you get it home, but after a few long road trips, then you may hate your car.
Yeah, I mean, to go back onto the production thing, kind of piggyback on what Grant said, in terms of evaluating a production, what I call production media asset management system. And probably at this point of the presentation, we probably all need a little virtual Java to continue. But real briefly, in terms of how I assess a system, really have to kind of go back to the beginning. So in the beginning, there was analog, analog to digital conversion. And so a lot of times when we ingested content off a tape, we already knew our selects list, we already knew it was coming on. The advent of everything being file-based, you have this explosion of content. That's really why EditShare developed the Flow Production Asset Management System, is because we realized early on that what's going to happen is now you have all these files sitting on these systems. So if somebody comes in, here's 10 terabytes of files, you figure out which ones you're going to use. And so that helps to design the production environment in terms of your asset management system. So in terms of how you assess it, the biggest thing is work group size. So are you a smaller work group, like 5 to 10? Are you 50? Are you 100? That'll help to define it. Also, the workflow that you design with your storage system, that's a big key in how you utilize your media asset management system. An example of that is you don't really need to be scanning certain file types. So, for example, I don't need to be scanning renders. I don't need to be scanning certain files that we are not going to be using. And they also have a sunset date. Like, okay, after 2 or 3 years, I'm going to stop using these files. I'm not going to really be working on them. So it might be stuff that's current on a project. As far as how you evaluate a system, it should be turnkey, should be integrated, should be production specific to production workflow. So there are many asset management systems out there from different vendors that can do everything under the sun. But that's not really production MAM. That's really just a general asset management system that Grant talked about. The other thing, it should be scalable. What you buy today should easily scale for tomorrow. So if you start with one of our all-in-one servers and you're using it today, well, what if I need more horsepower and proxy generation? What if I need to add an airflow gateway server? What if I need to add flow automation to automate tasks? So these are all things that your system should do. The other key is one vendor. A lot of the asset management systems on the market require you to buy the software from them. Then you've got to buy hardware from, say, Apple or Microsoft, or Dell or somebody. And so now you're managing all these different layers, which means you have a lot of fingers pointing at each other as to when something goes wrong. Well, it's not our system, it's their system. And so that's the value proposition that you get with the Flow system. And the thing I will say is, does our system do everything that all the other systems on the markets do? No. Nobody's does. But the thing that we do is we're built specifically for the production environment by people who understand the production workflow. The other key things are going to be like metadata tagging. So we make it very easy to add metadata, which are global descriptors to a clip. You can also add the logging functionality, which Grant went over. The search functionality, basic searches, advanced searches. And also, can your asset management system, does it have the ability to scan production formats as well as create production formats? And that's something that we do out of the box. So those are things that you have to kind of look at in terms of building your production media asset management workflow. Other keys are going to be such things as, am I working on proxy or I'm working on high res, and what kind of integration do I have with my editors? Can I drag and drop into an Avid bin? Can I drag and drop it to Premiere? We also make a Premiere panel, which basically Flow runs inside of Premiere, which gives you this unique interface to not only add clips from within Premiere, but also to mark up and add metadata, to tag clips. So these are things that on the production MAM level have to exist on your system, and things you have to evaluate. And so that's how I look at the interview process when I'm looking at prospective clients as well as new installs. How are you going to use the system? How do we build it so that you're using it for your environment as opposed to one size doesn't fit all? How do we build it for you so that you can get the most out of it as opposed to being kind of bogged down in the minutia of, I'm going to add metadata to this stuff and I'm probably never going to use these clips, or I'm going to add metadata and it really just needs to be for the stuff that we're going to use, might use over and over again. So those are things is, if you spend a lot of time locked up in that, you might end up kind of working against yourself. And so we provide Flow as a tool to increase your productivity as opposed to some of the other systems, which the learning curve is really steep, and you might stop because of that learning curve as well as what it takes to require to make it work. So those are the things I look at from a production man standpoint.
Excellent. Well, that's about all the time we have today. I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for some very insightful answers. I think everyone got a lot out of it today. And George, thank you very much for your presentation, and Grant for the great demonstration going over the EditShare shared storage and asset management environment. Following the webinar, I'll be personally following up with everyone for any follow-up questions that anyone in attendance may have. So look forward to corresponding or speaking with everyone. And thank you very much for joining us today for today's